Moral injury is a psychological condition that is commonly associated with veterans, specifically combat veterans or war veterans, but it can also affect healthcare workers and first responders. The concept of moral injury first emerged from clinical observations from a psychiatrist named Jonathan Shea, who wrote the book Achilles in Vietnam. I highly recommend this book, as well as Odysseus in America, which is about the reintegration and the returning home of a soldier. But essentially, what Shea began working with or identifying when he was working with Vietnam veterans was this wound of one's conscience that involves feelings of shame, guilt, spiritual distress, identity, and so forth. And as an OIF veteran who did deploy during the Iraqi war and who also struggled with treatment in the VA healthcare system in the past 15 years, not understanding what was kind of going on with myself, it was kind of like an eye-opening moment when I came across the term moral injury, because moral injury is not commonly known amongst individuals like myself who are actually experiencing it. So in this video, I'm going to share with you what moral injury is, as well as the model I'm currently proposing of 4 distinct ruptures that an individual is facing, and then also highlight the gaps within research and in treatment, and then you can kind of understand why it becomes difficult to treat. Very quick, if you're watching this in real time and you are a post 9/11 veteran, I am currently doing a study, and it's a research. It is IRB approved. It is to finish out my master's program with psychology, and what my study does is it collects veteran voices, post 9/11 veterans voices on the treatment satisfaction regarding PTSD and moral injury. What I discovered in my research was that the mental health professionals were using already evidence-based treatments for PTSD for moral injury. And even though the data comes back that it's really great for PTSD, it's not highlighting some of the issues with moral injury. And I thought that because there is no standardized treatment yet, maybe we can develop one, or maybe think about developing one based upon veteran voices. So if you are a post 9/11 veteran and you're watching this in real time before October 22nd, 2025, I do invite you to partake in that survey, share your voice, and further research and treatment to improve research and treatment on moral injury and to reduce veteran suicide. So now I'm just going to read to you directly from my blog post. That way I'm not missing anything, and I include a lot of information within this video, and you can just bounce around with the chapters. Okay, great. So what is moral injury? Moral injury occurs when someone perpetuates, witnesses, or fails to prevent actions that clash with their core moral values. It can also happen when an individual experiences betrayal by trusted authorities. And the psychological condition of moral injury, it usually occurs after an individual experiences what is termed as a morally injurious event. It primarily affects veterans. However, healthcare workers, first responders, law enforcement, humanitarian workers, teachers, social workers, and civilians who face no-win situations or systematic failures may also experience this. It's not the same as PTSD. PTSD is fear-based. Moral injury centers on guilt, shame, betrayal, anger, and a shaken moral compass. PTSD and moral injury usually co-occur in veterans who have been deployed during war. Common morally injurious events in war zones include killings that are combatant or civilian. It's whenever an individual may feel responsible for another person's death or participating in taking another's life. It can also occur through witnessing atrocities or the aftermath. So you can think of mass casualties or handling remains, or like cleaning up the aftermath of the battlefield. Another is violations or rules of engagement, so such as being ordered to engage in actions that clash with your moral code, and betrayal by leaders and peers or by the systems that you trusted. Common morally injurious events that occur within healthcare and with first responders include triage and rationing under scarcity. So this is choosing who gets limited time, who gets beds and ventilators. It can also look like following policies that conflict with patient welfare or professional ethics. So this means following policies even though you know it's going to be harmful to the patient. Witnessing or being asked to cover for negligence, abuse, or falsifying documentation. Errors with serious harm, despite good faith effort or being unable to prevent harm. Organizational betrayal, such as retaliation for speaking up, leadership failures after critical events. And then prioritizing one life over another in the field or arriving too late to save someone. Moving on, what it feels like in plain English. It looks like the mental replay loop of second-guessing a split-second decision of what you did and you didn't make years later. But it can also look like identity whiplash. So I don't feel like the person that I was, and I'm not sure who I am now. Again, tying this back into the veteran who feels that they were a different person prior to joining and then coming back and feeling different. Trust issues with leadership, authority, or governments, strong preference for closeness with other veterans, and distance, either that's emotional or physical, from everyone else. And then this also looks like faith or a worldview wake-up call. So an individual that's experiencing moral injury will usually question their once held religious or spiritual beliefs. Moral injury versus PTSD, and why the difference matters. So PTSD operates like a fear engine, and it's when your nervous system remains on high alert after danger. Moral injury is a wound to your conscience. So think of guilt, shame, betrayal, and the unending questions about meaning. PTSD treatment focuses on the body's alarm systems like hyperarousal, avoidance, startle responses, nightmares, whereas moral injury, the needs and the approach is different. There needs to be healing around the individual's conscience, their identity. Forgiveness is usually found within the treatment, repair, and worldview. So you can think of it like this. Moral injury is less about turning down the volume and more about rebuilding identity and an internal compass. And evidence-based PTSD therapies are effective, especially when fear dominates. But whenever the pain is moral, additional support is often necessary. So for example, within therapeutic approaches, an individual may work on creating meaning, self-forgiveness without excuses, and reparative actions whenever needed, and then sometimes spiritual care. So during my research, I noticed that the common themes with moral injury tend to focus on 4 distinct areas, which I'm currently indexing them now as like the 4 ruptures. A morally injurious event can fracture your understanding of yourself, others, and the world. Those impacts tend to cluster within 4 domains: meaning making, identity, relationships, and what I call worldview or faith. Now, since these don't heal on the same timeline, naming which one hurts the most right now helps focus your energy where it matters. This prevents you from feeling broken everywhere. So how this may show up within the individual looks like shame, guilt, moral rumination, trouble with self-forgiveness, betrayal, anger, disgust, feeling contaminated, spiritual struggle, withdrawal or alienation, sleep disturbance, and guilt dreams. Substance use to cope. This is very common with veterans. And then eventually a pull toward reparative or healing action. So the first rupture I discussed is meaning making, and that's from going from black to white to a usable gray. So before joining the military, rules felt clear. Decisions were easier. During service, not so much. Important decisions happen under limited information, conflicting demands, time pressure, and essentially no-win scenarios. And when the veteran returns home, the old moral framework that they once had, based upon easy decision-making, doesn't match the reality which is now lived. So clinically, this manifests as a persistent internal conflict and rumination, and it just simply means that your internal compass needs calibration, not full removal. So what this looks like is building or rebuilding a sense of meaning and purpose. That's usually the solution. This isn't always easy, and it does need careful handling, but a therapist can help. Common experiences, if you have like a wounded, meaning-making rupture, would look like looping what-ifs, guilt that doesn't like feel even despite like what others say. So you might have flashes of disgust. You might question like what you did or you saw, or just feel morally disoriented. The rupture of identity, and this looks like a internal conflict of who I am versus what I did. What this can look like is shame that won't shut up, feelings of being contaminated or feeling like a bad person, unworthiness. This can lead to people punishing themselves or inflicting pain upon them. They might feel emotionally numb. They can have trouble granting themselves self-forgiveness, even though whenever they offer it to a friend. Essentially, what's going on here with this rupture of identity is like it's that self-hatred, it's that self-loop. It's when the individual begins to internalize everything, and then we have to kind of work with their identity that's not who they are, it's just what they did. And it looks like helping the individual reframe and work out the narrative of I did X, it affected Y, and here's what I'm doing next. All right, so relationships. After service, trust with civilians feel paper thin, and trust with other veterans can feel immediate, just because the individual went through an experience that changed their worldview on life and death. Explaining that to the civilian becomes difficult because of stigma, because of the reactions that we get from other people. Like, it's kind of taboo to talk about some of the things that we did, so we don't. Sometimes social circles can also get smaller when an individual's like protector radar stays on high. At home, it can look like a shorter fuse for chaos, sitting with the back against the wall, skipping family gatherings or not wanting to engage in family gatherings, or needing more quiet time than an individual is used to. With friends, this can look like small talk feels pointless and group chats may go unanswered. And it's not because you don't care, it's just because you just don't have the words yet. In partnerships and parenting, you might see that this individual swings between being overprotective or being checked out. At work, this can look like a low tolerance for fuzzy ethics or office politics. And the individual might excel whenever they feel like the mission is clear, whenever they have a task that's easily definable, but feel distance with leaders that they don't trust or from tasks that clash with their values. And in community or faith spaces like churches, ceremonies can feel loaded, even though the individual does want connection, but the symbolism can hit raw in certain spots. This might look like if you know a veteran and they're saying no, they don't want to go to like a veteran parade, just respect it. It could be touching on some things that they don't want to experience or talk about. The solution to repair relationships is trust. And this is whenever working with a licensed professional or an individual that understands what's going on with the veteran is important. Like, it's that therapeutic relationship that usually is where trust starts to begin for a lot of veterans that feel hopeless or broken and kind of on the edge of wanting to end things. So worldview and faith. This is whenever an individual's beliefs are under review. Sometimes your old religious or spiritual beliefs cannot explain what you saw or what went on. And some people deconstruct, some rebuild. Most people need to do both. Questioning deep existential things isn't collapse, it's an internal audit. This work is to keep what's still true and revise what isn't, and give the rest time and grace. Common experiences look like spiritual pain or anger at God or a higher power. It can look like loss of meaning, grief braided with guilt, avoidance of faith spaces such as churches, or it can be a pull towards rituals or repair and reparative actions that restore dignity. So how is moral injury actually measured? So there are two distinct or main scales, questionnaire scales that try to identify moral injury within an individual, and that includes the moral injury events scale, which captures the exposure to transgression and betrayal, and the moral injury and distress scale, which is a newer Veterans Affairs developed measure that indexes symptoms to a specific event and spans high-risk groups. So again, the MIDS is trying to narrow down those individuals that are right in the cusp of trying to end things. Some FAQs about moral injury. Is moral injury treatable? Yes, it is treatable. It is not curable. There is no single gold standard protocol quite yet. There are a lot of researchers like myself behind the scenes trying to gather evidence and data to create something that works. But evidence-based PTSD therapies that have proven to be somewhat effective is rational emotive behavior therapy, prolonged exposure therapy, cognitive processing therapy. I didn't include this, but adaptive therapy is also a really good one. So who can experience moral injury? Combat veterans first and foremost, also healthcare workers, first responders, and others that are forced into no-win choices or exposed to betrayal or violations of their moral code. What are common signs and symptoms? Common signs and symptoms of moral injury include persistent shame and guilt, moral rumination, trouble with self-forgiveness, betrayal, anger, feeling contaminated, withdrawal from individuals or hyper-protectiveness, sleep, guilt dreams, using substances to cope, spiritual struggle, and sometimes thoughts of not wanting to be here. Will therapy force me to say everything? No. In therapy, you set your own pace. So you share as much as you want to. Good clinicians and chaplains work collaboratively with you with consent and clear boundaries. Can medications help? Yes. So there's some medications that help with co-occurring symptoms that have been proven, such as like sleep, anxiety, depressions. They do not directly treat moral conflict itself. Is spiritual anger or doubt a problem? No, it's actually common. So moral injury often shakes a person's beliefs, and it does revolve around questioning, editing, and rebuilding how one feels about themselves in the world. And again, this is where things get extremely deep, and a lot of individuals unwilling or afraid to go to talk about themes of life and death. I don't shy away from those, so that's why I'm talking about it now with you. And if you are a post 9/11 veteran and you want to share your story and participate in scientific research to improve veteran treatment to end veteran suicide, you can watch this video here on how to participate in that survey. And that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.